I remember the night my son was born like it happened yesterday. The rain tapping against the hospital window, the fluorescent lights buzzing, the faint scent of antiseptic and hope. I was 28, terrified, and the world felt both too big and too small all at once. When the nurse placed that tiny, wrinkled bundle in my arms, something in me shifted forever. His eyes, barely open, met mine for the briefest moment, and in that fragile silence, I made him a promise. I promised that I would raise him to be a good man. Not just a successful one, not rich, not powerful. Good. The kind who kept his word, who treated people right, who never forgot where he came from. That was the night I thought I'd finally understood what purpose meant. In those early years, I worked 2 jobs. A mechanic by day, security guard by night. His mother stayed home, caring for him, her laughter filling the house like sunlight. I used to come home after midnight and find her asleep on the couch, him curled up on her chest, their breathing perfectly in sync. Sometimes I'd just stand there and watch them, my heart full and aching, whispering to myself, this is what it's all for. I wasn't an educated man, but I knew love could be taught without words, in how you show up, in what you sacrifice, in the quiet ways you stay. As he grew, I taught him the little things first. How to tie his shoelaces, how to throw a ball, how to look a man in the eye when he shakes your hand. I taught him respect, honesty, compassion, the things my own father had drilled into me with rough hands but a soft heart. I told him that being a man wasn't about being strong, but about being kind. Never turn away from someone who needs you, I'd say, especially family. He'd nod seriously, as children do, his small face full of trust. He was a bright boy, curious, sharp, full of questions I didn't always have answers for. Why do people lie, Dad? Why do some people have so much and others so little? Why do you work so much? I'd smile and tell him, so you won't have to. Back then, I believed that if I worked hard enough, if I poured every ounce of myself into him, he'd never have to feel the struggles I did. I didn't realize that sometimes, in trying to protect our children from hardship, we also protect them from empathy. His mother passed when he was 16. Cancer, fast and cruel. She was gone before we could even learn how to say goodbye. That's when everything changed. He stopped talking as much. The light in his eyes dimmed, replaced by a quiet anger that neither of us knew how to handle. I tried to be both mother and father, but grief isn't something you can fill. It's something you learn to live beside. We started arguing more. He thought I didn't understand him. I thought he didn't care anymore. But beneath all that shouting, all that distance, was still love. Bruised, maybe, but alive. When he graduated high school, I remember standing at the back of the auditorium, clapping until my palms stung. He didn't see me. He was surrounded by friends, all laughter and celebration. But I saw him. I saw the man he was becoming. Later that night, I handed him the keys to the old truck I'd been fixing for years. She's yours now, I said. Just promise me one thing. Wherever life takes you, don't forget where you came from. He hugged me for the first time in years, and for a moment, it felt like we were whole again. He left for college a few months later. First one in our family to go. I was proud beyond words. Every paycheck, every late night, every ache in my back had been worth it. I'd done it. I'd raised him right, or so I thought, but life has a cruel way of humbling you. The calls became shorter, then less frequent. Then they stopped altogether. I'd leave voicemails just to hear his voice on the machine. Sometimes I'd get a text on my birthday. Hey, Dad, hope you're good. I'd reply instantly, but the conversation never went further. I told myself he was busy, building his future, chasing his dreams. But deep down, I felt the quiet truth settle in. He was slipping away from me, one ignored call at a time. When he came home for the first time in 3 years, I barely recognized him. Expensive clothes, a new accent, a confidence that looked a lot like arrogance. He hugged me quickly, a formality, not affection. You've done well for yourself, I said, smiling through the ache. Yeah, he said, glancing at the peeling paint on the porch. You should think about fixing this place up. I laughed softly. I will when I get the time. He didn't laugh back. Over dinner, he talked about his job, his apartment in the city, the people he met, like he was describing a world I'd never belonged to. When I told him about the neighbor's new baby or the church roof leaking again, he nodded absently, scrolling through his phone. I wanted to shake him, to remind him that this was the home that built him. Instead, I just said, "I'm proud of you, son." He didn't look up. "Yeah, thanks, Dad." That night, after he went to bed, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee gone cold and watched the stars. The same stars we used to count when he was small. I whispered into the dark, where did I go wrong? Maybe I'd loved him too much. Maybe I'd taught him to dream so big he forgot the ground he came from. Or maybe this was just how life worked. Fathers raising sons to need them less and less, until one day they don't need them at all. But something inside me refused to accept that. Because I hadn't just raised him to leave. I'd raised him to remember. And somewhere deep inside that man who'd outgrown his roots, I knew my boy was still there. He just needed to find his way back. And that's where this story begins. Not with the love that built us, but with the distance that tested it. It's strange how silence can be louder than words. When my son stopped calling, the house didn't just grow quiet, it grew empty. Every sound reminded me of his absence. The creak of the floorboards I used to fix while he laughed beside me. The faint hum of the fridge, where his favorite snacks once sat waiting. Even the ticking of the old wall clock felt cruel, counting the seconds of a life I no longer shared with him. At first, I tried to make excuses for him. "He's busy. Dad," I told myself, like he used to call me that way when he was small. "He's working hard, living his dream." I imagined him in a city apartment, coffee in hand, tie straight, smiling that same crooked smile that once lit up our kitchen. I'd picture him walking down clean, crowded streets, surrounded by people who didn't know his story, who couldn't see the man behind the suit. And every time I thought of that, a warmth would rise in my chest, quickly followed by a hollow ache. I used to wait by the phone. Pathetic, maybe, but it was my lifeline. I'd leave it on the armrest beside me, pretending to watch TV while my eyes kept drifting back to it. Each vibration made my heart jump. Each silence reminded me that it wasn't coming. Weeks turned into months, months into years. I sent him messages. Little updates about the house, the neighborhood, the weather. Sometimes I'd add, "Miss you, son." No reply. Then one morning, the phone did ring, an unknown number. For a moment, my heart forgot how to beat. "Hello," I said, my voice cracking. A pause. "Hey, Dad," his voice. "My boy, I nearly dropped the receiver. Son! It's been so long. How are you?" He laughed lightly. "Yeah, sorry. Been busy." I swallowed hard. "That's all right. You're doing well, I hope." "Yeah, work's good. Actually." He hesitated. "I'm calling because I need a favor. A favor, not a visit. Not a how have you been. Just a favor." Still, I smiled like a fool. "Of course, son. Anything." He sighed. "My car broke down, and I need some money for repairs. I'll pay you back soon." I didn't even let him finish. "Don't worry about paying me back. I'll send it today." Silence. "Thanks, Dad." Then the line went dead. That night, I sat in the same chair, staring at that phone again. The favor didn't hurt. The emptiness after did. Because when you become just a bank account to your child, you start wondering if love has an expiry date. Weeks later, he called again. Another favor. This time, rent. Then another, a loan for a business opportunity. I gave what I could until the well ran dry. My pension barely covered the bills, but I told myself, it's okay. He's my son. Love, after all, doesn't keep score. Then, one evening, I decided to visit him. I didn't call first. I wanted it to be a surprise. I'd baked his favorite pie, the one his mother used to make. I took the early morning bus to the city, holding that pie like it was something holy. His building was tall, shiny, cold, everything our old house wasn't. When I reached his door and knocked, I heard voices. Laughter. Then the door opened. He looked different, polished, comfortable. "Dad," he said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" I smiled. "I was in the city for a checkup. Thought I'd stop by." He hesitated. "Now's not a good time. I have company." I peeked inside. A few of his friends, wine glasses in hand, the kind of people who'd never set foot in a place like ours. I held out the pie. "I brought this for you." He took it awkwardly, like I'd handed him something fragile he didn't know how to hold. "Thanks, Dad. I'll call you later, okay?" He didn't invite me in. Didn't even ask if I wanted a glass of water after a 4-hour ride. I nodded, pretending not to notice the discomfort in his voice. "Sure, son. I'll head back." He closed the door gently, polite, but final. As I walked back down those steps, pie tin still warm in my hands. I realized I'd just become a visitor in my own son's life. When I reached the bus stop, the pie slipped from my grasp, crashing onto the pavement, its sweet filling splattering across my shoes. I stared at it for a long time, tears I didn't feel running down my cheeks. People passed, staring, whispering, but I didn't care. That pie had been love, simple, homemade, full of memory. And now, like the bond I'd built for years, it was gone. The ride home was long. The countryside blurred past, all golden fields and setting sun, but I saw none of it. I kept hearing his words. "No's not a good time." I thought about all the times I'd dropped everything when he needed me. The times I'd worked through fevers just to pay for his textbooks. The nights I'd prayed for his safety. And yet, when I showed up with a pie, it wasn't a good time. That night, I sat on the porch again, coffee in hand, watching the sky fade into darkness. For the first time, I admitted something I'd been avoiding. My son wasn't the boy I raised anymore. Somewhere along the way, he'd become someone else, someone who saw his father not as love, but as obligation. And maybe, just maybe, I had helped make him that way. Because I'd spent his whole life teaching him to stand tall, to never ask for help, to keep moving forward. But I'd forgotten to teach him something just as important. That sometimes it's okay to look back. I never thought I'd see the day when my own son's success would feel like a punishment. For years, I prayed for his dreams to come true, for the world to see the brilliance I'd seen in him since the day he took his first steps. And when it finally happened, when he stood on stages and smiled for photographs, I told everyone in town, "That's my boy." They'd nod impressed, and I'd pretend I was fine. But pride can be a cruel disguise for heartbreak, because every time I saw his picture, every time I read about his achievements, I realized I was learning about my son from strangers, not from him. One day, I got a letter. Not from him, from the bank. My son had listed me as a reference for a mortgage. The letter said he'd bought a condo, a beautiful property in a prime neighborhood. I smiled bitterly. I hadn't known he was even looking. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the letter, running my fingers over his printed name. I remembered the day we built his first toy car together, out of scraps and glue, him giggling as he painted it red. I wondered if he'd still remember that day, or if it had been buried beneath the noise of his new life. Weeks passed, then months, and then out of nowhere he called, "Dad, I'm getting married." His voice was steady, confident, rehearsed.
That's wonderful,"
I said, forcing a smile he couldn't see. "When's the big day? Next month?" "It's going to be small, just close friends and her family." My heart sank. "Will I be there?" Silence. Then a hesitant, "It's complicated, Dad. Her parents are a bit traditional. They want to keep it simple." I swallowed hard. "Simple?" I repeated. "I see." He cleared his throat. "I'll send pictures." And just like that, my son, the boy who once clung to my leg on his first day of school, who cried when I left for work, was getting married, and I wasn't invited. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, listening to the rain hit the roof, the same sound that had once comforted me when he was little. I thought about calling him back, telling him I understood, telling him I was proud. But the truth stuck in my throat. It wasn't pride holding me back. It was pain. Because sometimes pride isn't arrogance. It's armor. The kind we wear when love starts to hurt too much. A week after his wedding, a thick envelope arrived. Inside was a photo. Him and his new wife, smiling beneath an arch of flowers, her in white, him in a suit that probably cost more than my truck. They looked perfect. On the back, he'd written, "Hope you're doing well, Dad. Take care of yourself." Not, "Wish you were here."
Not, "I missed you." Just take care.
I placed the photo on the mantel, right beside the one of him as a boy, missing his front tooth, holding the fish we caught that summer. Two versions of the same person. One who needed me, one who'd forgotten I existed. The days that followed blurred together. I filled the hours fixing things that didn't need fixing. The loose porch rail, the squeaky hinge, the garden gate, anything to avoid the quiet. But grief isn't always about death. Sometimes it's about the living, watching someone you love drift so far that even memory can't bridge the distance. Then, months later, he showed up. I was outside pruning the rosebush when his car pulled up, sleek, black, foreign. He stepped out looking like he'd walked straight out of a magazine. "Dad," he said, smiling. My heart leaped despite myself. "You're here," I said. "Come in, come in!" Inside, he looked around the house like it was a museum. "You've kept everything the same," he said softly. "Didn't need changing," I replied. He nodded, then sat at the table, fidgeting with his watch. "How's married life?" I asked. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Good. Busy." There was something in his voice, something fragile, uncertain. I wanted to reach out, to ask what was wrong. But before I could, he said, "Dad, I wanted to talk to you about the house." I frowned. "What about it?" "It's old. Falling apart. You should think about selling it." "Selling it," I repeated, laughing quietly. "This house is your mother's memory, son. It's where you were born." He leaned forward. "I know, but it's not safe. The roof leaks, the wiring's outdated. You could use the money to move somewhere better. Closer to the city, maybe." "Better," I said. "This place is better. It's home." He sighed. "You don't understand, Dad. Things are different now. You need to think about the future." I looked at him, and for the first time I saw a stranger, a man so polished, so careful, that he didn't realize what he was saying cut deeper than any insult. "The future," I said softly, "was supposed to be you." He looked down, ashamed, or maybe just uncomfortable. "I'm only trying to help." "No," I said. "You're trying to erase." He stood abruptly. I should go. As he left, I followed him to the porch. "Son," I called. He stopped, hand on the car door. "One day," I said, "you'll understand that everything I kept, this house, these things, this life, I kept for you. Because when you forget where you came from, you forget who you are." He didn't reply, just got in the car and drove away. That night, I sat in the silence he left behind and realized that pride, his and mine, had built a wall too high for either of us to climb. He was proud of his success. I was proud of my sacrifice. And between those two kinds of pride, love got lost. But what I didn't know then was that life has a way of breaking pride down, slowly, brutally, inevitably. And soon both of us would learn that lesson the hardest way possible. It was a cold November evening, the kind where the sky turns the color of bruised steel and the wind seems to carry whispers from the past. I was in the kitchen, nursing a cup of tea, when the phone rang. For a moment, I didn't move. Calls after dark rarely bring good news, and a strange heaviness filled the room before I even picked it up. "Mr. Harlan," a voice said, distant and professional. "This is St. Mary's Hospital. Are you the father of Michael Harlan?" My heart stopped.
Yes,
I said quickly, my voice trembling. "What happened?" "There's been an accident," she said. "Your son was in a car collision on Highway 9. He's in stable condition, but we need you to come in as soon as possible." I didn't even hang up properly. The phone clattered to the floor as I grabbed my coat, keys, and the first pair of shoes I could find. The drive to the hospital was a blur, headlights streaking past like ghosts, the rain pounding on the windshield, my fingers white, knuckled on the steering wheel. My mind replayed every conversation we'd had, every silence that had stretched too long, every word I wished I could take back. When I reached the hospital, the smell of antiseptic hit me, sharp, sterile, merciless. I ran to the front desk.
my son, I said, gasping.
"Michael Harlan." The nurse looked up, her eyes softening. "He's in surgery. The doctors are doing everything they can." Surgery. The word rang in my ears like a bell tolling. I sat down, my heart pounding, staring at the double doors that led to the operating room. I thought of him as a boy, how he'd fallen off his bike once, scraping his knee, how I'd carried him home while he cried into my shoulder. I would have given anything to trade places with him now. Hours passed. The hallway emptied and refilled, the clock on the wall ticking away minutes that felt like years. Finally, the surgeon came out, removing his mask. "He's stable," he said. "A few broken ribs, a concussion, but he's lucky. It could have been much worse." Lucky. I almost laughed. "Can I see him?" "Just for a moment," he said. When I walked into that room, I barely recognized him. His face was bruised, his arm in a sling, tubes and wires surrounding him like a web. But he was breathing. My boy was breathing. I sat beside him, taking his hand gently. "You're okay, son," I whispered, though tears were already blurring my sight. "You're okay." His eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then widening as they found me. "Dadba," his voice was cracked, fragile. "I'm here," I said, squeezing his hand. He tried to speak again, but his throat caught. Don't cry, I chuckled through the tears. I'm not crying, you fool. Something's just in my eye. A faint smile appeared on his lips, the first real one I'd seen in years. For that moment, it was like we'd gone back in time. No arguments, no pride, no distance. Just father and son. He drifted off to sleep again, and I sat there for hours watching him breathe. I didn't care about the hospital bills or the long night ahead. I just thanked God for giving me another chance, because maybe this accident was fate's cruel way of bringing us back together. The next morning, the doctor said he'd be fine, but he needed rest and someone to stay with him for a while. Before my son could protest, I said, "He'll come home with me." Michael opened his mouth to argue, but when he saw my face, tired, lined, but resolute, he just nodded. "Okay, Dad." That ride home was quiet. The city seemed smaller somehow, less intimidating. He looked out the window most of the way, his reflection pale against the glass. I wanted to ask him 100 things. What really happened, how he'd been, what kind of life he'd built without me. But instead, I just said, "Do you remember this road?" He looked up. "Yeah, we used to take it to Mom's favorite picnic spot." I smiled faintly. "You remember." "I remember everything," he said softly. When we reached home, he hesitated at the door, looking around like he was stepping into a memory. "It smells the same," he said, almost to himself. "Coffee and wood polish," I chuckled. Some things never change. Over the next few days, the house came alive again. I made soup, changed his bandages, and scolded him for trying to walk too soon. He grumbled, but there was warmth in it, the kind that only comes from old love rediscovered. We started talking again, really talking. About Mom, about his wife, about life. One night, as we sat by the fire, he said, "Quietly, Dad, I messed up." I looked at him. "You didn't." "I did," he said. "I forgot what mattered. I thought success meant freedom, but it just made me lonely." He paused, eyes glistening. "I left you behind?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "You were finding your own way, son." "That's what I wanted for you." "No," he said firmly. "You wanted me to remember my way back." But we sat in silence for a long while after that. The fire crackled, the clock ticked. And for the first time in years, peace settled over that house again. When he finally went back to the city, he hugged me, really hugged me. Before he left, "I'll visit soon," he said. "Promise." I smiled, patting his back. "I'll hold you to that." As his car disappeared down the road, I felt something lift inside me, like the ache that had haunted me for years was finally learning to fade. Maybe this was how life worked, breaking us, then giving us just enough time to rebuild before it broke us again. But I didn't know then that the accident wasn't the end of our story. It was just the beginning of the reckoning, for both of us. He kept his word, at least for a while. The visits became regular. Once a week at first, then every few days. He'd drive up in that same car that had nearly taken him from me, carrying bags of groceries or small gifts he thought I might like. He'd fix the leaking tap, trim the hedge, or just sit on the porch with me as the sun went down. It wasn't grand or dramatic. It was quiet, gentle, and real. And after years of emptiness, that quiet was everything. I remember one afternoon, the kind of soft golden day that makes you believe the world still has mercy. We were sitting outside, mugs of coffee in hand, watching the wind chase leaves across the yard. "You know," I said, "I used to dream of this. You coming home, us just talking." He smiled faintly. "I guess it took a crash to wake me up, oh?" "It's all right," I said. "Some lessons come harder than others." He looked at me then. Really looked. "I'm sorry, Dad, for all the times I made you feel small." I didn't reply right away. Words like that don't just heal. They reach into old wounds and remind you they existed. But I finally said, "You were never the kind of son I was ashamed of. Just the kind I missed." He nodded, his eyes shining. And for the first time in years, I saw not the successful man, not the proud adult, but the boy I'd raised, the one who used to run barefoot through the grass, who'd fall asleep in my lap during thunderstorms. He was still in there, just buried under years of noise. Time moved gently after that. He'd come by on weekends, sometimes with his wife, quiet, kind woman, though I could tell she didn't quite know what to say to me. We were polite, almost strangers bound by love to the same man. But she smiled at me the way his mother used to. Soft, understanding, patient. I liked her for that. Then, one Sunday, he came alone. No smile, no groceries. Just a look I hadn't seen since the day his mother died. "Dad," he said, sitting down heavily. "There's something I need to tell you." I set my mug down slowly. "What is it?" He hesitated, fingers tightening around his knees. "We've been trying to have a baby for a while now, and the doctors say it's not possible." "Not for us." The words hung in the air between us. I could see the pain in his eyes, the same kind of pain I once carried, the pain of losing something you never got to hold. "I'm sorry, son," I said softly. He nodded, blinking fast. "I guess," I thought. "I don't know, maybe I'm being punished. For how I treated you." I leaned forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Life doesn't work that way. It doesn't punish or reward. It just teaches. Sometimes cruelly." He swallowed hard. "I just wanted to be a good man, Dad." "You are," I said. "You just forgot that good men can still make bad choices." He stayed for dinner that night. We didn't talk about the baby again, but the silence between us was different now. Not empty, just heavy with the things we didn't need to say. As weeks passed, I noticed a change in him. He called more often, asked questions about my health, brought over things I didn't need but appreciated anyway. One evening, he showed up with a box. "What's this?" I asked. He smiled. "A new phone, so you can video call me. No excuses." I laughed. "You're assuming I'll learn how to use it." "I'll teach you," he said, and he did. Patiently, like I'd once taught him how to ride a bike. It felt like time had folded in on itself, like we'd traded places. He was the teacher now, guiding me with the same steady tone I'd used decades ago. It was bittersweet but beautiful. Then one day, out of nowhere, he said, "Dad, I want you to come live with us." The words caught me off guard. "What?" "Our house has a guest room. It's close to the hospital and the park you like. You shouldn't be alone out here." I smiled sadly. "You don't have to do that." "I want to," he said. "You took care of me my whole life. Let me take care of you now." For a moment, I couldn't speak. My throat tightened. The same son who once called me a burden now wanted me close. The irony wasn't lost on me, but I didn't remind him. I just nodded. "All right, son. We'll see." That night I sat by the window long after he'd gone. The stars were bright, scattered like old memories across the dark. I thought about how life had turned, slow and merciless, yet somehow still found its way back to kindness. A few weeks later, I did move in with him. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to see what forgiveness looked like when it finally bloomed. His house was big, sterile at first, but it slowly filled with warmth. My laughter echoed off walls that had never known it. I'd sit on the balcony in the evenings, watching the city lights and listening to the sound of life all around. Sometimes he'd sit beside me, handing me a beer, and we'd talk about everything and nothing. One evening, he said quietly, "I was scared you'd never forgive me." I turned to him. "Son, forgiveness isn't something you earn. It's something you're given because love doesn't know how to die." He looked away, blinking hard. "I wish Mom could see this." "She can," I said softly. "She's been watching you longer than I have." He smiled then, small, broken, but real. And that night, for the first time in decades, I slept without the weight of regret pressing on my chest. Because for all the hurt and distance, for all the years lost to pride, my son had finally remembered the promise he made, to take care of me in my old age. Not out of duty, but out of love. But life, as always, had one more lesson to teach us, one that neither of us saw coming. It began on an ordinary morning, quiet, gray, and unremarkable. I woke up to the sound of rain tapping against the window, the smell of fresh coffee drifting through the hall. Michael had already left for work, his wife humming softly somewhere in the kitchen. The world felt peaceful, settled, like the calm after years of restless wandering. I remember thinking, maybe this is it. Maybe this is what peace feels like. But peace, I've learned, is fragile, like thin glass. And life has a way of shattering it just when you start to believe it's safe to hold. By noon, the rain had turned into a storm. The sky was a slab of iron, the wind howling through the trees like a beast let loose. I was reading in the living room when the phone rang. A sharp, insistent sound that sliced through the thunder. I picked it up without thinking, expecting maybe a call from the grocery or one of Michael's friends. It was the hospital again. "Mr. Harlan," a voice said, tight with urgency. "Your son, he's been in an accident." My body froze. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. The room spun. No, I whispered. No, that can't be right. I'm sorry. The voice said gently. There was a pile up on the highway. We need you to come immediately. I don't remember hanging up. I don't remember telling his wife, though I must have, because she screamed. A sound that still echoes in my bones. All I remember is running through the rain, barely able to breathe, the storm beating against me as if trying to stop me from getting there. When we reached the hospital, everything was chaos. Flashing lights, soaked paramedics, the smell of diesel and blood and fear. I ran through the halls calling his name until a nurse caught my arm. Sir, please, you can't go in there. Where is he? I shouted. My son! Where's my son? They led me to a small room, not the emergency ward, not the recovery room. Just a room, too quiet, too still. And that's when I knew. When the doctor walked in, he didn't have to say it. I saw it in his eyes. The kind of sorrow that needs no words. Still, he said them, because that's what they do. I'm sorry. He didn't make it. The storm outside roared, shaking the windows. I couldn't hear the rest. Something about a truck, black ice, no time to react. My knees gave out, and I remember the doctor's hand on my shoulder, the nurse whispering something I couldn't make out. The world blurred, sound vanished, and the only thing I could feel was the unbearable silence that follows when your heart stops but your body keeps living. His wife collapsed beside me, her sobs piercing the air. I held her, though I was barely conscious of it. My son, my only boy, the same one who had just promised to take care of me, who had finally come home, who had finally remembered what love felt like, was gone. They let me see him, cold, pale, still. I touched his hand, the same hand that once clung to mine when he was 5 years old, afraid of thunder. Now I was the one afraid of what came next, of the emptiness waiting to swallow me whole. Son, I whispered, my voice shaking, you kept your promise. You came back. You did everything right. I'm proud of you. I always was. I pressed my forehead against his, the way I used to when he had nightmares, and for a moment, it felt like he might open his eyes again. But he didn't. The funeral came and went like a dream I couldn't wake from. People came, spoke kindly, offered food, condolences, stories. But all their words fell into the same void inside me. Nothing could reach the part that was gone. Because that part, the best part of me, had been buried with him. The house felt haunted after that. His shoes by the door, his coffee mug on the counter, his laugh still echoing faintly in the halls. Every morning I'd wake up and expect to hear his car pull into the driveway. And every morning I'd remember he wasn't coming home again. Weeks passed. His wife moved out, back to her parents. I didn't blame her. The walls here were too heavy with memories. I stayed because leaving felt like betraying him twice. First in life, then in death. But the nights were the worst. I'd sit on the balcony where we used to talk, the city lights glowing below, and I'd whisper to the dark. You broke your promise, son. You said you'd take care of me. Then, softer, but I forgive you. Just come home one more time. Of course he never did. Yet, somehow, he was still there. In the smallest things. In the smell of rain. In the sound of a car passing at night. In the shadow that crossed the hallway when I wasn't looking directly at it. One night, after another sleepless stretch, I found myself going through his old things. Photos, letters, a few notebooks from his school days. And tucked inside one of them, a folded piece of paper. On it, his handwriting, Dad, if anything ever happens to me, don't blame yourself. I finally understand what you meant. That love isn't about how much we get, but how much we give. Thank you for never giving up on me. You were right. A man's true worth isn't in what he builds, but in who waits for him when he falls. Michael, I don't know how long I sat there, holding that letter. Maybe an hour, maybe a lifetime. The storm outside had finally quieted, but inside me, the thunder would never stop. Still, there was peace in knowing he'd found his way, even if it took losing him for me to see it. I folded the letter back, placed it in my pocket, and whispered to the night, You found your way home, son. That's enough. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt the weight lift just a little. Grief is a strange companion. At first it screams, loud, raw, relentless. Then, slowly, it goes quiet, sitting in the corners of your mind like a shadow you can't shake off. It doesn't go away, it just learns to whisper. Months passed after Michael's death, yet every morning, I woke up expecting to hear his footsteps in the hallway, his familiar, "Morning, Dad," echoing down the stairs. The silence that followed was worse than pain. It was absence, heavy and endless. I lived like that for a long time, drifting from day to day, keeping his room exactly as he'd left it. His clothes folded neatly, his books stacked beside the bed, his watch still resting on the nightstand. I couldn't bring myself to touch anything. That room was all I had left of him, and disturbing it felt like erasing the last trace of his existence. Then, one morning, about 3 months later, I received a call from his office. A man named Mr. Daniels, his manager, said he had some of Michael's personal belongings, documents, a few keepsakes, and something he'd asked them to deliver to me, if anything ever happened. When the package arrived, it was simple. A brown envelope, sealed neatly, my name written in his handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were a few photos, a keychain shaped like a small compass, and a sealed letter. On the front of the envelope, it said, "For Dad. To be open when you're ready." I stared at it for a long time, unsure if I'd ever be ready. But that night, under the soft hum of the living room lamp, I opened it. His handwriting danced across the page, careful, steady, as if he'd written it on a day he felt calm, maybe even happy. "Dad, if you're reading this," then I guess life decided it had other plans for me. "I don't want you to cry, and I don't want you to feel guilty. I've had more good in my life than I deserved, and most of that was because of you. I know I wasn't the son you deserved. I hurt you, ignored you, made you feel like you didn't matter. I wish I could take it all back, but I can't. What I can do is tell you what you should have heard a long time ago. You were the best father anyone could have asked for. You taught me everything that mattered. Kindness, patience, humility. You didn't just raise me to be a man. You raised me to remember what being human means. I used to think strength meant never needing anyone. Now I know the truth. It's about having someone you can fall apart with. You were that for me, even when I didn't deserve it. There's something else you should know. Before the accident, I'd been thinking about leaving my job. I wanted to move closer to home. I even found a little house, not far from the lake Mom used to love. I was going to surprise you on your birthday. I guess I won't get to do that now. But maybe you can go there, live there, for both of us. There's peace in that place. I want you to have it. One last thing. I never forgot that day in the hospital after my first accident. You told me I was okay, that everything would be fine. You lied, but I needed that lie. It kept me alive. So here's my lie for you, Dad. You're going to be okay. I love you. Always have, always will. Michael. By the time I finished reading, the paper was soaked with tears. I don't know how long I sat there, clutching it to my chest, rocking slightly like a child. The house was silent, but for once, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt full. Full of words unsaid, love remembered, forgiveness finally complete. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I packed a small bag, clothes, his letter, that little compass, and I drove. The directions he'd left were clear a town 2 hours away, near the lake we used to visit when he was a boy. When I arrived, I understood why he'd chosen it. The lake shimmered like glass, surrounded by pine trees that whispered in the wind. The house was small but beautiful. White walls, blue shutters, a porch overlooking the water. And as I stood there, I could almost hear his voice. "This is it, Dad. This is where peace lives." I bought the place that very week. Every morning since then, I've sat on that porch with my coffee, watching the sunrise just as he once watched it with me. I talk to him sometimes. Out loud, unashamed. I tell him about the birds, the weather, the neighbors. And when the wind stirs the trees, I swear I can feel him listening. One evening, while unpacking, I found the compass again. It didn't point north. The needle was stuck, slightly tilted toward one side. I laughed through my tears. "You're still guiding me the wrong way, son," I said. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the compass didn't need to point north. Maybe it pointed home to him. Over time, I started writing letters back. I'd sit by the lake, open my notebook, and write to him about everything. How much I missed him, how proud I was, how I was learning to live again. I never mailed them, of course. I just folded them and tucked them beside his letter, like a conversation between two worlds that still cared to listen to each other. And sometimes at night, when the moonlight dances across the water, I imagine him sitting beside me. Older, wiser, but still my boy. We don't talk much in those moments. We don't have to. Some love doesn't need words anymore. It just exists, quiet, eternal, and unbroken by time. That's when I realized something. Maybe he didn't leave me. Maybe he just went ahead to build the next home, somewhere I'd follow one day. Until then, I'll stay here. I'll live the life he wanted for me. I'll keep the promise he couldn't. Because a father's love doesn't end when the heart stops beating. It just learns to live inside the silence. It's been 2 years since that storm. Too long. Quiet years in the house by the lake. The one my son found for me. The seasons have come and gone like slow breaths. Spring with its soft rebirth, summer with its golden hum, autumn with its melancholy wind, and winter with its silence that feels too much like memory. I've learned to live with the ache now. It doesn't burn anymore. It hums softly in the background of my days, like an old song that never truly ends. Every morning I wake before dawn, make a cup of coffee, and sit on the porch as the first light spills over the water. The lake glows gold, and for a moment it feels like he's right there beside me. I talk to him still. Not out of madness, but love. Love that refuses to die, even when everything else has. Sometimes I tell him about the neighbors, the old couple who argue over tomatoes in their garden, the young boy who fishes by the dock and reminds me so much of him at 10 years old. Other times, I just sit in silence, listening to the birds, letting the world breathe around me. And when the wind brushes my cheek, I like to believe it's him saying, "I'm still here, Dad." Inside the house, his things remain where I placed them. The compass sits on the mantel, still frozen in place, pointing forever toward the same direction, home. His letter rests in a frame above my desk, its words worn soft from my fingers. Sometimes, when the loneliness grows too sharp, I read it aloud, each line a prayer, each word a heartbeat. But life, for all its cruelty, still finds ways to surprise you. Last spring, a young woman came to the house. I was sitting outside, trimming the small rosebush by the steps, when I saw her walking up the path, hesitant, nervous, holding a small box in her hands. "Mr. Harlan?" She asked softly. "Yes," I said, straightening. She smiled faintly. "You don't know me. My name's Claire. I worked with your son." Something about her voice made me pause. She looked kind, the kind that carries grief beneath it. "Please, sit," I said, gesturing to the porch. She did. Her hands trembled slightly as she set the box down between us. "Before he passed," she said, "Michael asked me to give you this. If I ever found you. I didn't know how to reach you until recently." I stared at the box, unable to breathe for a moment. My voice was barely a whisper. "He left something else." She nodded. "He said it was something he never got to finish." I opened the box carefully. Inside was a small wooden carving, unfinished, rough around the edges. It was of 2 hands, one large, one small, reaching for each other but not quite touching. Beneath it was a folded note, only one line written in his handwriting. "Some bonds don't need to touch to hold forever." I couldn't stop the tears that came then. Claire looked away politely, giving me the dignity of silence. When I finally spoke, my voice was soft. "He made this?" "Les," she said. "He used to work on it during lunch breaks. Said it was his way of keeping something real." I smiled through the tears. "That sounds like him." Before she left, she said something that stayed with me. "He talked about you all the time, Mr. Harlan. He said he used to think he was running toward his future. But in the end, he realized he'd been running away from his home. When she was gone, I sat there for a long time, holding that carving, tracing the unfinished space between the hands. It felt like a message. One last reminder that love isn't about holding on. It's about knowing when to let go without ever really losing what matters." That night, I took the carving down to the lake. The moon was full, casting silver light across the rippling water. I placed the carving gently on the dock, the way one might place flowers on a grave. "You finished it, son," I whispered. "You just didn't know it." Then I looked up at the stars, the same ones we used to count together when he was little. Back then, I'd tell him, "Each one is a promise. They burn so we don't forget." Now, looking at them, I finally understood. Promises don't break when people do. They live on, in memories, in the spaces love leaves behind, in the stories we keep telling even after the voices that began them fade away. A few weeks later, I decided to write one final letter. Not for him this time, but for whoever finds it after me. I left it tucked in the drawer beside his old compass. It read, "If you're reading this, know that I was a lucky man. I lost much, but I loved more. My son taught me that forgiveness is the purest form of love, and that no goodbye is ever final if your heart remembers. Take care of the ones who raised you. One day you'll wish you had more time, and when that day comes, may you look back and find peace in knowing you gave them love while you still could." Now, as I sit here watching the sun dip low over the lake, the sky painted in gold and amber, I can feel it, the gentle quiet that comes before the end. My body's slower these days, my breath shorter, but my heart is light. Because I know when my time comes, I won't be walking into darkness, he'll be there, waiting, smiling, maybe with that same teasing grin he had when he used to call me old man. And I'll say, "You took your time," and he'll laugh and reply, "Had to make sure you didn't get lost, Dad. Then we'll walk, side by side, into whatever comes next. No burden, no regret, just love still holding on, because that's what fathers and sons do. They find each other, even in the end."